Hello, everyone. We'll wait for everyone to trickle in and jump onto the link. And while we do that, if you know me, Maddison, Katie, I don't think you guys have been on a webinar with me before, but I love a good icebreaker just to get things going while people are jumping onto the link.
I love it.
So I did a bit of fielding to see what I should ask, and I think I've landed on a good one. I want to know, would you rather be able to travel into the future or would you rather go to the past? And if so, what's the reasons why? Katie, I think I'll kick off with you first.
Oh, I think that I'd actually like to go back and um, see my kids when they were little and enjoy it more and not be so stressed because I think it's lovely to see the future unfold as a surprise. So I think it'll be going back to see the things that I potentially didn't savor at the time. Great question.
That is really lovely. I like that. And being able to relive those moments is so
Yeah,
important. I mean, we never get to do that, do we?
I know.
Except for in photos, I guess. Looking at a few videos. Madison, what do you reckon? What's the
What what a great icebreaker, Katie. You're making me feel bad about my response. I would have said to the future, I dislike surprises. I want to know what's coming next. We've obviously been talking a lot around kind of AI growth, and I really just kind of want to see where we're at in the future.
I reckon,
What
Madison,
are
do
we
you want
doing?
to cut through it? You just want to cut through it and have the robots working for you and like,
Absolutely.
oh, fair enough.
Automate life.
Yeah, that's right. How do I make it? I hope it's not like that movie where we were all like, I think
Oh,
that cartoon movie, everyone in cars and just driving around and not really interacting with each other. So yeah, hopefully it doesn't look like that in the future.
leave the driving to me, but they can do my washing
Oh,
That's
I
for
love
sure.
that.
Oh, it's brilliant. Oh no, it's perfect. Okay, so we've got a bit of a mix. I can see. Want to go back, want to go forwards. So it kind of I think to a certain extent ties into the financial resilience side as well, because it's something that when we look back, the situation that a lot of people were in was a lot different to kind of the impacts that we're seeing now and the rates of burnout and things that we're seeing. So I'm really glad that we are tackling this webinar. I'm so excited that you guys are here. And so what I'll do is I'll kick things off because we are a few minutes in. I've seen a lot of people jump on now. So welcome everyone. Kia ora. So lovely to have you all here today to be discussing financial resilience and actually looking at the fact that this is something that impacts businesses. Funnily enough, as much as you might not want to consider this as something that impacts your business, it does at the end of the day. And it's something that we're seeing becoming more and more prevalent in the workplace. So I'm so excited to be presenting this and at least hosting this with two amazing people. Before I get into introductions, as you've heard from the icebreaker, there's a lot of different perspectives here. I just wanted to kick things off by saying hello to everyone. Thank you so much for joining. Just a little bit of housekeeping before I get into intros is that this is being recorded. So don't worry, you don't have to be frivolously writing anything down. Everything is fine. You can just sit back, grab yourself, tea, coffee, whatever you fancy, and just relax and hear these experts talk about financial resilience in the field. And more importantly as well, like I said, this is being recorded. It will be sent out to you afterwards. So make sure that you are just relaxing. Just a bit of a disclaimer that I normally do. We are providing this information to you in good faith. So make sure that you're not holding us to account for any of this stuff. If you are dealing with something specifically when it comes to, financial questions and services, that's why we've got the lovely Katie on this call. So you can reach out to enable me and you can always go from there. But what I want to do more importantly is actually introduce the main presenters and speakers that we have today. And I'm so excited to present this panel discussion where we have Maddison from Employment Hero. She is a senior people advisor. And then I've got Katie as well, who is a financial advisor and the head strategic coach at Enable Me. Katie, if I can kick off with you, could I get a bit of an introduction about you and what you've been doing in this space and why this matters so much to you?
Oh, of course. And I'm just delighted to be here. So, yes, I'm a qualified financial advisor. I'm also a chartered accountant, and I've been at Enable Me for the last decade, working with amazing people and clients. And I spend my days helping people figure out money stuff that, let's be honest, nobody really taught us at school. And I work with awesome individuals, as I said, also organizations who are just tired of the paycheck to paycheck cycle in their business, and they really want to build something more sustainable. And what I love about this work, it's not really about money, it's about reducing that 3 a.m. kind of worry spiral about bills, helping people feel confident, and ultimately freeing up mental space for the things that actually matter. And I think that financial stress has a sneaky way of following people to work every day. So I'm just so excited to be here. Thank you for inviting me. And I really want to make sure that we share some really practical insights about how HR can actually move the needle on this.
That's so exciting. And it's true, isn't it, that we've got this massive shift, like I kind of said in the beginning, where we've always, and I was talking to Maddison about this before we jumped on to the actual presentation component, but we were talking about the fact that before it was never a consideration that in the workplace you would even need to look at this, consider this. But the reality is that people are just so inextricably linked to workplaces and businesses, and the lines are getting a lot more blurred between personal and work life, right? Whereas before people would just shut up and shop and then they just kind of go home and then that's it, you're kind of done. But it's not the same anymore. So I'm really excited, Katie, to see kind of where this conversation unfolds. Really excited for the panel discussion, and Maddison, so excited for you to bring actual practical experience that you see on a day-to-day basis. So give us a bit of an intro about you. Obviously we work quite closely together, but I'll pretend like I don't know you.
Amazing. Thanks, Sanam. So welcome to everyone dialing in on the other side. So I'm Maddison, or Mads is also fine. Like Sanam mentioned, I'm a senior people advisor at employment here, and my experience really spans both in consulting and working directly within that HR space, predominantly in really fast scaling tech and also fintech. Fintech definitely gave me my passion for kind of that financial well-being and resilience and understanding money. But I see firsthand daily how kind of financial stress really enters that workplace and plays a part in employees' well-being and performance. And like Katie mentioned, really excited to have a bit of a talk today how we can really start to move the needle. What are the small things we can start doing now as we kind of move forward in this new era?
Yeah, oh, that's fantastic. And it's so true. And like I said, you've got your ear to the ground. I'm so glad you said I can say Mads, because it's just a lot more comfortable. Because you've got your ear to the ground, like you actually see what's happening on a day-to-day, and you see the way that HR teams are having to mold and bend and work with employees and the business to kind of bridge that gap as well, and to also explain to businesses that this is actually a real thing and it does exist. So I'm really excited. I'm so happy that you guys are here. And I know we've also got Bernie in the back. As many of you know, Bernie hangs around. She fields through your questions back there. So keep in mind that this is a Q&A webinar and panel discussion. So absolutely, if you've got specific questions that you want to kind of send our way, and you've got somebody here that's a financial advisor. So, I mean, obviously we're not going to provide advice, but still you could ask your little questions, then we'd be more than happy to field through them at the end, and we've saved some time for that as well. So use the Q&A box at the bottom of your screens for that. And what I will do is I will kick things off. We are actually going to cover 3 key topics, and we had a chat about it. I know Bernie was very obviously involved in prepping and putting everything together. We were looking at how to actually structure this, and we thought the best way to do it so that people understood the why behind it is to first look at what is financial resilience, why does it actually matter, how is it impacting HR, and then moving on to the second area, which is really understanding what problems employers are facing on a regular basis. I mean, what's coming up in the workplace that no one's really talking about, but they are dealing with it across the board. And then third, we never like to do a webinar without people actually getting some practical information and practical next steps. So absolutely, we will be providing that to you. And like I said, ask your questions, more than happy to field through them. So we'll kick things off by looking at, like I said, the first area, which is around, what is financial resilience? And like I said, we keep seeing all these headlines, things popping up. And to be honest, a couple of years ago, or about a year ago now, actually, we did a financial or / well-being report that we put together. And what we found out as a business across New Zealand, across Southeast Asia, across Australia, people were attributing a lot of burnout to actually financial related problems. So we realized that there are a lot of employers out there that are having to deal with employees that are saying, look, I'm really struggling at home financially. Is there anything that you can do? So I really wanted to touch on why this matters and what's important. So I guess the first question, Katie, I wanted to send it your way, is what's the real impact that you've seen in terms of financial stress showing up inside the workplaces? What are you seeing that employers are facing?
Yeah, the numbers are so stark when you look at them. I was having a look at the Rover With My Money survey, and they talked to 860 working New Zealanders, and 74%
Wow.
said they feel stressed about money. So I suppose if you're listening to this and you are stressed, you are absolutely not alone. But where I think it gets really interesting from an HR perspective, the study also showed that people think that the only way they will get ahead is if they are paid more. Like over 65% of people think this. And that's when personal financial stress becomes a workplace problem. And it isn't just a personal problem that stays at home. I think when 29% of people are putting off like major life decisions because of money worries, and 56% are living payday to payday, that mental load is absolutely showing up at work. And you kind of see that colleague who might seem distracted in meetings, takes longer to make decisions. I think there's a decent chance that financial stress is kind of eating up that cognitive bandwidth.
Yeah.
So I really do think we're talking about a workforce where a chunk of people are in survival mode, and survival mode, in my opinion, just does not breed the creativity, innovation, or engagement we need people to bring their best selves to work. And I think what we see is more sick days, stress leave, and people jumping ship for any job that pays a bit more. And that's what we need to fix together.
Yeah, and that's such a fair point as well, Katie, because
Mhm.
one of the things that is probably going to come up quite soon is the laws changing around pay secrecy in New Zealand, which means that a lot of employees will be able to discuss and talk about their pay. And what we're noticing is that once they start talking, a lot of people jump ship for 50 cents, per hour. So it's really important that these considerations are made by an employer, and that you're kind of looking at that real impact of what's happening. And it's not necessarily to always raise people's salaries and pay, but it's, taking a holistic approach and really looking at it as, what other options we can have a look at. So, I think that's a fair point. And then, Mads, to you, do you think that for you practically, are you kind of seeing anything that's showing up in the workplace? Is there anything that you've kind of seen in your previous experience as well, over the years?
Yeah, absolutely. And I completely agree with all of Katie's points. We're really starting to see that level of burnout, productivity, increase of sick leave, people just overwhelmingly less engaged in the
Mm.
workplace. So when we're talking about financial well-being, often these are the signs before that conversation is being had. So when we talk about building financial resilience, it's not really just focusing on being a compassionate employer during hard times, but it's a real business issue with kind of real measurable costs like higher absenteeism, which is affecting people's bottom line in businesses.
Yeah, and so you're kind of seeing that pattern across the board. Is that what's kind of happening, where
Absolutely.
there's a clear correlation between, sickness, absenteeism, and would you say that there are particular, I guess, symptoms that you're kind of seeing, or things that manifest quite quickly? I know, Katie, you mentioned things like the fact that people might be more disengaged and things like that. But
Mm.
is there anything that you've kind of seen, just to give a bit of a flavor? We'll get into it more a bit later.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think to kick things off, you're starting to see lower productivity.
Mm.
People are stressed, so they're sitting down to do their work day, but they can't really tackle the mental load that is work with the mental load that's happening at home. And what that productivity is then leading into is they're trying to proactively solution solve. And often, like Katie mentioned, they're looking to move jobs purely for that pay bump.
Mm.
And then they're starting to be disengaged. They're going to interviews during those work times. Then they're calling in sick. So they're taking that leave sporadically. And it's just this flow on effect.
Yeah. Okay. And it's quite interesting how it's all so interrelated, but you would attribute it to something else. You might think, oh, it's burnout, maybe personal issues at home relating to X, Y, and Z, or health, but you wouldn't really think, okay, it could actually be the fact that there are money issues and things like that. And that's what we realized from the report. Once we did that, we looked at all of those different employers. Generally, the general consensus was, yeah, that there is a lot of things that happen at home, financial related, that do trickle into work. And I guess to that, in terms of we love the word resilience. I know that it comes up so often, and especially post COVID, we've used it for everything. How to be resilient in HR, how to be resilient in this. But financial resilience is something that I feel like flies under the radar. I haven't heard it so much, compared to other areas of resilience when it comes to burnout relating to being piled on with extra tasks and things like that. So I guess in your perspective, and I'll kick off with Katie first. What is financial resilience, and in a workplace context, how does that all work, and why should businesses, whether they've got 1,000 employees or whether they've got 5 employees, why should it matter, Katie?
Yeah, such a good question. Thank you. And in really basic terms, I think financial resilience in the workplace is basically helping people to get to a point where money isn't the thing that's keeping them awake or making them panic when the car makes a weird noise. And I love an analogy. I'm sorry if I drown you in analogies.
Oh, I love it.
This webinar, but I really do love that analogy. You can give your team a fish or teach them how to fish.
Oh, I love that.
Give them more money or help them be better with what they have. And that's where we lean in that resilience piece. Because as you well know, that data shows us that financially confident people perform better at work. And that's the nexus in terms of payback. And they're more focused, more resilient, and frankly, just more present, as Maddie was saying. And I think from a business perspective, it's really about building a team that isn't one unexpected expense away from crisis. And I think when we're encouraging our employees to bring their whole brain to work instead of like that stressed, distracted version. And I think it's really important to clock this isn't about making everyone wealthy. It's actually about giving people the skills and confidence to navigate whatever comes their way, because let's face it, economic uncertainty, it's just not going anywhere. But a workforce that knows how to adapt and manage through ups and downs, that is gold for any business.
Mhm. Yeah. And the reality is that what I noticed is a lot of times employers will have to do things that are a little bit unconventional, a bit outside of the box. I was speaking at a conference a couple of weeks ago, and one of the things that I brought up was the fact that there was a really large, reputable, courier company in New Zealand that had an employee that was actually quite heavily overweight, and they worked with the employee because the employee didn't want to lose their job, even though they weren't able to perform certain tasks and duties, and they actually worked with them to actually lose the weight.
Amazing.
And these are things that are not conventional, right? You would never think that this is something, but then they have got a stellar employee that's just, obviously had some personal issues and things happening in their outside of work, which has kind of helped bolster and uplift them. And then it's also helped the workplace because team morale has gone up. You've got somebody that's alive and kicking and happy. So it really is thinking outside of the box a little bit as well. And like you said, just taking it outside of this thought process that, look, we're so separated, and this is not, really impacting the workplace.
Yeah.
And I guess, Mads, with what you're seeing on a regular basis, I mean, why is financial resilience important for the workplace, and what is it for you that you see ear to the ground on a daily basis? Or what are you seeing kind of cropping up when it comes to being resilient?
Yeah, absolutely. So, highlighting kind of those small and medium businesses, especially being so critical, because when you rely on every single one of your team members, when one employee is struggling, it really starts to affect the whole morale, like you were talking about, Sanam. So you see this expand much further than even just the person having those financial concerns.
Mm.
Um, we talk a lot about kind of building for the future, scaling and growing. If you're having team members impacted, it's probably going to impact your future hires as well. So, in terms of making sure that your business is growing in a really healthy and scalable way, we've got to focus on what's impacting employees, because at the end of the day, they're your biggest investment in what's going to, have your business succeed.
Yeah, and it's interesting, right? Because we want to remove the conversation, and we want to say that, look, it is very isolated, or it doesn't relate to HR and things like that. But I want to move into our kind of second topic, where we're talking about the issues that employers are directly facing at the moment. And I know you've both have amazingly touched on so many different areas, but I think now is the time we might hone into it, to a few of them. I know I've got a range of questions, but we might not get through all of them. So at least we can feel through the ones that feel like it's comfortable to go to the next one. So we'll go with one of the questions that we had kind of discussed previously, which is around financial well-being actually being something that employers need to look out for. I guess the question I want to ask is, on one side, why is it important for those larger companies that have HR teams? Why is it so important for them to get involved? Mads, coming from a HR perspective, you would be able to weigh in heavily on that. And then on the other side, Katie, I'll ask you after Mads weighs in on what you think employers should be doing, and looking at smaller businesses. So Mads, I'll kick you off first. What do you think with HR that they should be? Why should they be so involved? What can they do? Can they actually be facing these problems? And do you think it's too much for them to take on?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think, at the time when you're looking at reactive things, reactive issues, managing burnout, productivity levels, you're having conversations with employees, managers are getting involved, but we're not actually fixing the crux of the issue. So you're going to constantly be working through those reactive issues. So when you look at a HR team in a business, and I'm so passionate about making sure that there's a space for being a strategic partner and growing that business with HR, business leaders really grow around kind of the vision, purpose, goals, and HR really connects that directly back to employees. If you're constantly worried about kind of the fires and putting out that reactive side, you're never actually going to move forward to those goals and the purpose that you're wanting to grow. So I think it needs to be a really important and crucial kind of part of every business's strategy, whenever you've got something affecting employees, especially like Katie had mentioned, 74%, pretty high.
And I guess to that, Katie, with a smaller business, and let's say you don't have a HR team, do you think that the smaller businesses are still uniquely positioned to be able to address these particular issues and have these conversations in the workplace?
Well, 100%. I think even small, well-delivered initiatives can have tremendous impact, because employees across the board are just genuinely hungry for this support, and just don't make it too hard. Like when we look at the data, like lots of people are just looking for very practical help, budgeting advice, investing 101 were like literally the top requests. And I think often if you can make that money part of the annual kind of planning cycle, because so often, small, medium, big businesses, there's the calendar dates that are intrinsically within the calendar anyway, like Mental Health Week, November, breast cancer awareness. And Money Month, I think, is a really great anchor within an organization, no matter how big or small, whereby it should be front of mind. And I think, again, don't make this too hard. I think what works really well, and we've seen this in countless organizations, just even starting with a tailored presentation that addresses your team's actual challenges. And I'm not saying generic financial advice, but stuff that's actually relevant to their lives and income levels. And then people can choose how much further they want to go. I think that's really important, that those kind of practical tips. And again, it's just getting started. But honestly, you can start even smaller. Like most businesses, if I'm honest, are already spending money on employee benefits that likely the staff don't even understand. So, even a benefits deep dive session where you explain the real dollar value can be really eye-opening. And I think the key is making it, in my mind, super simple to deliver, but genuinely useful. that would be my advice. And small, medium, or large, I don't care, all equally relevant.
And I guess to that, actually, Katie, while I've got you,
Yeah.
what would you say would be ways that an employer could approach this? Would you recommend maybe speaking to all of your employees in one-to-one sessions to kind of field and figure out if there is, like, let's say that there is a general consensus financial wellness issue
Yeah.
and things like that? Yeah, how would you?
Yeah, I think that would be a great
Yeah,
option in those one-on-ones, but sometimes that money is such a
it's a sensitive
tricky
topic.
subject.
It's
It's so sensitive,
it's
so
sensitive,
awkward,
and
and
we
I'm
can
a
say
financial
that.
advisor.
Yeah.
But I get it. So sometimes if you can take a step back and like survey your people, like keep it simple and anonymous. Questions we often ask are, how stressed do you feel about money? What would actually help you feel more confident about your finances?
Mhm.
I I think there is a gap between feeling stressed and action, and the deliverable that we want to encourage the client, the employee to lean into is that action piece.
Mhm.
And I actually feel like you don't need to get personal or invasive. You're not asking about bank balances or like details. You're just trying to understand whether your team would benefit from budgeting workshops, Kiwis over education, or simply explaining, as I said, those employee benefits in terms of dollar terms. So I think the great thing, even about just asking the question, you are sending a message to your team, and I think that message is, we know money is a stress is really real and we care about helping you manage it. And I think given people's top request was budgeting advice for everyday Kiwis, there's clearly an appetite for just practical, no nonsense help. So I'd start there, see what you learn, and then build something that actually addresses what your people tell you need. And keep at the back of your mind, you're investing in having a more focused, engaged, and frankly, more present an employee.
Yeah. And what we're seeing so much more is that, like you
Mm.
said, throughout the year, we've got so many different initiatives, things that are
Yeah,
constantly, cropping up in workplaces. And I've worked for really small employers as well. And obviously we've got things like, mental awareness, week and
exactly
month. And
right.
then you've got Te Reo Māori, that there's so many times that workplaces will have somebody come in and teach over the course of a few months. So there are so many options, and if you're going down that path, then why not the financial wellness path
You
and
did right.
fielding exactly what issues are impacting your employees and then kind of going from there. So absolutely makes sense. And like I said, it's about kind of broadening that out a little bit as well. And so I
Mm.
want to talk a little bit about retention, because I know that that's a huge issue. And Mads, we've got a large company here at Employment Hero, and so there is a lot of employees that we hope you are trying to retain and keep on board. So I want to understand from your perspective, how does financial well-being actually influence whether employees stay or they look elsewhere, and is there a retention issue that we're seeing? I know you touched on it before, Mads, but how can HR really help in that situation?
Yeah, it's a great question, and can confirm retention is definitely a huge focus for me. Um, so in a market, especially right now, where pay rises just aren't always possible, and I think a lot of employees are understanding of this fact, and that's what the data is showing us in terms of people reaching out around kind of budgeting and debt help. Mainly focusing on that communication side. So when we're looking at retention strategies, any business who's not focusing on employees, you're always going to have a retention problem, no matter what the intent or the concern is by that employee. So when we look at something like financial well-being, which is focusing on heavily in our workforce at the moment, a business's ability to focus on that is becoming a real key differentiator when people are looking at the role that they're staying in or a role that they're moving on to next. People are considering what a business is doing in this space. And I think employees in general are looking at their whole package. So it's not just their paycheck at the end of the period of work. So if a company is showing genuine care for financial health with tools, education, it really can create a sense of loyalty that a competitor can't really easily replicate. So as HR and business leaders, we're moving really just beyond that payroll, starting to think creatively how we're really supporting people to feel secure, and that in turn is going to create a happier workforce that are sticking around.
Mm.
Yeah.
And it's so good, isn't it? Because the reality is that, and I know, Mads, we've spoken about this before as well, is that it doesn't have to be what people think retention needs to look like in terms of, we offer a 6-month, vacay here, and you can do this and you can do that. I mean, we were talking about, like, I've worked as an employment lawyer for the hospo industry, and something that held its own throughout years and years of employees coming in and working for businesses was things like offering like a free lunch, or just providing a space for them to go and eat, and things like that. So there are so many other factors that people can consider and can look at. And I know a lot of times we come at this from big corporate, and it doesn't have to be that, because the reality is that a smaller business might not be able to operate like that. But Katie, to that, do you see anything with the retention side where you're seeing, okay, maybe the financial, well-being means that we need to do X, Y, and Z to retain employees?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And it's really interesting. The Financial Services Council Financial Resilience Index shows that this spans actually all income levels. I think that can be a bit of a fallacy that it's just lower paid employees. It's not. It's the whole gambit in terms of your employee workforce. And we've seen employees leave higher paid jobs for roles that offered better financial education, more flexible benefits, or, put it frankly, simply a workplace culture that acknowledged and supported their financial well-being. And I think what we see is if you reduce stress and improve confidence with money, we've seen it through our Money Fit programs, you really help boost productivity, retention, and workplace well-being. And I think it's really about creating value beyond the paycheck, because that genuinely improves people's financial lives, and as a result, their performance at work.
Yeah. And it's crazy to think that things as simple as, we provide you a little bit more education around financial well-being, around your finances, how to budget, is what is drawing people away. And it's just, I'm sure it wouldn't be on employers' radars, right? So
Yeah, you did right. And I actually think that smaller businesses often have more flexibility to get creative, like you
yes.
really do.
Yeah.
And I think in the survey data I was reading recently, they asked this really cheeky question in terms of what would people do with $1 million lotto win. Sounds amazing. But the answers are so interesting, and people said that they'd speak to a financial advisor first, invest 3/4 and travel with the rest. So very relatable. People want guidance and capability, not just the cash. That's what I caught from that. And I think that in terms of those results, 30% of surveyed people are counting on winning lotto for retirement, and
Wow.
28% are banking on inheritance. So
Wow.
that's pretty telling, and a really big gap between wishful thinking and practical planning that an employer really could help bridge. Yeah, it's just fascinating. And I think that those financial skills, they compound over time, and that's just so rewarding to see in clients, but also in businesses, because there's this beautiful kind of forward momentum that comes when your people are doing better with what they have. That is a beautiful thing in terms of resourcing and productivity into the future.
Yeah, and it's funny that you say wishful, thinking, Katie, because the first thought that popped into my mind was, is it wishful thinking about getting the inheritance of the lotto? No,
I
but
know,
the
I know.
lotto.
I
Call it
always
the lotto.
joke. Yeah, I always joke it's very bad taste to rely on somebody else dying to sort your
Yeah,
money.
that's right. Well, I did work in wills and estates, and I can tell you it is a dog eat dog world when it comes to
Oh, I hear
setting
you.
up
I hear you.
plans. Yeah. So, Mads, I'll move on to one of the other questions that we kind of had looked at before, which was, when you're not able to compete with salary, and I know Katie, you've touched on these things as well, and Mads, you as well, but can you tell me what other from your perspective and your experience, what other meaningful financial well-being support was provided to employees to actually keep them engaged? Was there anything that you used as, like, a card up your sleeve to actually keep them retained in the workplace?
Yeah, absolutely. We've spoken about education a lot, and
Mm,
managing your money is definitely a starting off point. And then, as you'd mentioned, Sanam, creative solutions are really the way to go, especially if you can't really move that budget in
mm,
a huge way. So things like flexible working, if you've got the ability to do it, and saving money on commute 2 days of the week, you're still getting your office days, but you're taking note of a potential solution. Professional development's also a really big one outside of understanding financial well-being. So a lot of people are looking at future study that's related to their role. So potentially having an ability to do that for your employees. Um, Another kind of low cost kind of action point is having just a workshop yourself or finding free online resources. It doesn't have to be a huge starting point. So you could be sharing a webinar, you could be sharing a free tool. There's a lot of also things like digital or neobanks that now just show analytics into your bank account. So just driving a conversation and showing that you're genuinely interested in it is a good start. Then you can always look at things like perks, benefits once that money window maybe opens up a little bit, but not enough to give everyone a lotto win, as much as we'd all probably love that.
Yeah.
So, like your EAP has access to things like financial advisors generally to provide help. You've got other perks and benefits that directly affect people's bottom lines. You're looking at kind of healthcare membership discounts, you're looking at gym membership discounts. These are things that people are paying for anyway, or it could simply start with a lunch at office, or if you're on site, maybe there's a fridge or a staff room with some cheese and some bread in there for your staff members who haven't been able to bring food for the day. It really can be starting small, and they're more impactful than I think people can realize.
Yeah, and to that, the reason why Mads mentioned the cheese and the bread before we jumped onto the call, we were talking about this because at my partner's workplace, for example, we've got a lot of people that work in production, and they're always, on the move, on the go. They're working with a lot of difficult, heavy things, really, really hot environment. And what gives them a sense of peace and ease is actually just being able to go into the break room and have some cheese on a piece of bread, maybe a slice of ham, and toast that up, and they're really happy with that. They love the fact that the workplace provides this, and it's just that little bit extra. So, and to what Mad said as well around the flexible working, this is something that I think a lot of employees have been asking for. We've seen a massive uptick in it over the last couple of years since COVID. And when I spoke at a conference a year or so ago for Employment Hero, it was really interesting because when I started talking about flexible working, I got bombarded with so many questions from HR managers around this. And the reality is, you can absolutely entertain and have the conversations around flexible working with your employees. And if you have reasons why you can't offer that, then that's absolutely fine too. You just have to lay that out. But it doesn't mean shutting off and closing the door to that conversation. And like what Katie said earlier, it's just about being that business that is willing to have those conversations and bringing it to the forefront. That's what's going to set you apart from a lot of those other businesses out there. And it's just basically saying, hey, we're here to listen, and we're here to hear you out, and that's it. And so that can kick off quite a lot. So we'll move into one of the last areas that I just wanted to touch on, which was, I guess, competing salary. So we mentioned that there are other things that you can do, when you're looking at these particular situations. But obviously, people are leaving 20 cents on the dollar sometimes. They're jumping ship. Is there anything, Katie, that you've specifically seen, maybe just from personal experience, even if it's a case scenario that you've seen, where a company is able to kind of compete around providing support that might not necessarily always be salary related and has actually pulled people back? I know you mentioned the education piece, but was there anything else that you've seen?
Yeah, it's so fascinating. And I think that HR is uniquely placed to see these issues. And I think often it's about looking for patterns. And I can give you a great example. We dealt with one employer that reduced absenteeism around payday by just having breakfast provided. And so I think stepping back and really looking at those trends around pay cycles is important. And just don't make this too hard. Like, pick one thing and do it. And then I think momentum shifts, because it shouldn't have to be too hard. And again, going back to that kind of fish analogy, we're not saying that you are responsible for them being wealthy, and there's so many things you can't control: house prices, cost of butter. But I think it is like a massive opportunity to be impactful, and people are just so hungry for that practical help. I love that idea of, the bread and the cheese in the fridge. I mean, that's so, it doesn't really cost an organization that much, but you're breeding that environmental whereby people know that you actually care, and that's the thing that often people stay for, versus just chasing the unknown in terms of pay packets, which we know doesn't actually necessarily even translate to them doing better. It usually means they just spend more money on silly things. Do you know? So and again, it's that endless cycle, spending all this money training these people, and then they're off chasing actually a very small amount. So how do we really make sure they know how much they mean to the organization, and being very conscious that there is something we can measure around the impactfulness of this in terms of, absenteeism, sick days, etc. So always got to have a business case, right? And I think that HR professionals are so uniquely placed to be so impactful in this space. And yes, it's uncomfortable, but often these things are super simple, and it just starts with that first thing, and then it snowballs, and then all of a sudden it's really entrenched in your environment.
Yeah. And, you mentioned the cost of living and these pressures that are happening. I mean, that's the reason why I don't have a mortgage, because I choose to buy butter instead.
I
So
know.
that's generally how it goes,
And if you're having it with eggs,
Yeah, well, that's it. You're just through the roof. Yeah, that's right.
Avocado, heaven forbid.
Yeah, that's right. So I think that the reality is that, look, we're seeing cost of living pressures increasing, demand is going up, and people are wanting to get, other perks and other things in the workplace. But I wanted to now look at some practical solutions. One of the questions that actually came in was, let's bring it back New Zealand centric. Let's talk about things that are tried and true, that you've tested, that you've seen in the with other clients and employers, and what's actually worked in the workplace. So I can definitely see employees are wanting a lot more. A lot of employers are saying that maybe we might not be able to provide the financial support. So I guess now it's really turning to both you, Katie, and Mads, around how can businesses move away from being reactive when responding to burnout, because a lot of it is financial resilience related, right? So Mads, I might kick off with you first, just to look at what are some proactive steps that you can do. I want real actionable ones that you've kind of seen, and that you've implemented in the workplace that's actually really worked, to make sure that people are not burning out financially.
Yeah, this is a really great question. Something that I have seen, especially in really office-based or site-based locations, food. It goes a lot further than you think. Katie, when you were talking about breakfast, it actually reminded me of something that I've seen historically around Mondays and Fridays being the
Yes.
cause of concern for
Right.
absences for a business. And it directly impacts your bottom line when you've got a lot of your team having exactly the same days off on a trend basis. So having things that are specifically on Mondays or Fridays or Wednesdays, if that's the issue midweek. But I think it really starts with the conversation and making sure that you're targeting the right things for your people. So if you've got it in total environment that's all remote first, potentially they're working in different global climates, and you may need to do a bit of a review on what you're offering to them for perks and benefits. What makes sense for one person doesn't make sense for another one. And I think when we think about financial resilience, it's absolutely not about the paycheck. People want to work for people that they trust and that they can
So
get
true.
around purpose and goal with. So if you're tying back a financial help from anything that you're putting out into the business, whether that be a lunch and learn, a podcast sharing, just having the conversation in your one-on-one going, how are you doing external to this? I know that this ABC is a pressure for you. What are your goals? Can make a really, really big difference. So I would say start small,
Mm.
and then continue
Yeah.
onwards.
Yeah, and that makes, complete sense in terms of it's psychology as well, isn't it? I mean, if you're putting on a breakfast like Katie mentioned on like a Monday, for example, and Mads, you've mentioned it Monday or Friday, depending on what it is. It's that psychological impact of, hey, we're going into another work week. We're giving you a bit of breakfast. You can settle in. You're not coming into work just to be on the phones or to quickly do this and to or to just go straight onto site. So it gives a little bit of buffer period as well, where people are able to kind of rejig in terms of their psychological state and their mental well-being. And I guess, Katie, let's say that I came to you. I'm a business owner, whew, finally once in my life, um, and I come to you and I say, look, Katie, everyone is stressed out. I can feel it. People are worried. I've given everyone pay rises, but we're just really tight at the moment. That there isn't anything I can do. I'm just trying to figure out what's a couple of things that I could give to my team that would get them going. What would you say?
Yeah, first I'd high five you because you're
Yeah.
obviously in the proactive realm of business, and you've got to be. You can't be reactive around this. And what I would say to you is just build this financial well-being piece to right from that onboarding process, whether it be in any layer of the organization, and make sure you tell your employees about their benefits. It's such a miss, I think, for so many organizations that people don't know the KiwiSaver benefit, or they don't know that you have a relationship with an insurance provider that it's discounted. That is huge to people. But I think also for lots of the organizations we work with, it's about just learning practical money management from day one, and then you are setting them up for success rather than waiting for them to ask for help, because that's the proactive piece of this. And I think often that starts with just a super practical session that addresses the most common financial challenge, which generally is that foundational piece around budgeting, KiwiSaver, dealing with debt, etc. And then people can choose their path from there. But I think that's a fantastic message that you are showing that you actually care, because that's why people stay with you. They stay with you because they are loyal to you, they trust you, and you have built an environment where they feel valued. And those really tangible things are sending that message to your employees, not necessarily what you pay them, it's that wraparound support. And often you're already doing it. Just tell them properly about it.
Yeah, and it's about it not being buried somewhere deep in an employment contract, or just around like even KiwiSaver, right? We're not financially, like you said, Katie, in the beginning. No one's gone out and studied this in school. Well, I mean, there are a subset of people like chartered accountants that have wanted to actually.
No.
But the reality is that a lot of people are just not financially savvy, and they don't have these conversations. And I grew up in a household, just speaking from personal experience, where these conversations didn't really come up. So when I moved out of doing trigonometry and all of those things in high school, then I was like, how do I actually do things? How do I actually operate as a human being, paying for things and doing all of this and budgeting? So having those conversations and just those low cost initiatives can be a massive, massive impact. And I wanted to ask, is there anything that you've seen, Katie, specifically around, with financial education? I know you've mentioned budgeting and different things. Is there any one in particular that you would suggest the first topic to roll out to a business where people are saying, I just don't know how to handle my money. My paycheck just goes as soon as I get it
Yeah.
that week.
Yeah. always it starts with that foundational piece around cash flow management, cash in, cash out. How do we set up a really good environment where the default position is success, not failure? And you're just really calling out. And I think this is the fallacy around capitalism, that people always think the thing that fixes their financial position is just to earn more money. That is absolutely not the case. It's actually being smarter with what you have. And I think that if you can have that session almost standalone, where people can walk away saying, I could do this, this, and this, and they will be better off. That is what you want to focus on, not whiffly waffly aspirational. It's deeply pragmatic. These are the systems and structures you could put in place tonight, and you and your family will be better off. That is what I love about that education piece. And again, I think there is flexibility in this day and age around that delivery. Look at us all on this webinar, all in disparate places. Like, it doesn't have to be hard. And again, it's just doing that first thing, and then you're away, and then you realize, oh, it wasn't actually that hard. And I think that making sure that you measure as well. So you're very busy. I understand that you're juggling lots of priorities, but you need to know that there's payback in terms of these initiatives as well, because this is somewhat about energy management. But I think if you can provide that nexus in terms of, well, we're doing better, well, then business owners, etc., are going to be more likely to fund them ongoing. And then you just build them in your calendar and you're away.
Yeah, and it is that, isn't it? It's just a system and a process that gets put in place, just like you would for any other initiatives
Yeah,
in the
you did
workplace.
right. Yeah,
Yeah.
and I loved that calendar piece. Do you know, like, so you don't want to think about it too hard. So August is money month, all about the theme this month is about buffers and building up emergency funds. So again, in your mind, if you're not having to think about it too hard, there's lots of resources available within this month. So, you know, in your calendar, August is money month. September is Wills month. And again, it just gives you something to anchor yourself to. And also knowing that you're not being left behind in terms of with all the other organizations are leaning into this money month and we're not. What message are we sending to our people?
Yeah, and it is that as well, and like what Mad said, that could be the competitive edge, is the fact
You
that
did right. Yeah.
yeah, and we're offering this, and this is kind of what is the leg up compared to other businesses. And Mads, before we kind of get into the Q&A section, I just wanted to ask you, in your personal experience, I know that you mentioned EAP and financial services kind of come, or like advising coming under that, but is there anything else that you've kind of seen which is easy like that to roll out in a business where employees do get a little bit of financial education, or something that might be quite low cost for a business as well would be great to consider? Is there anything else you can think of?
Yeah, so obviously around education, like a lunch and learn, if you've got someone passionate about this space, or even if they've just done a bit of research, run it yourself. You know, there's no harm in
Yeah.
doing that at initially, but also network with businesses like me from where Katie is, and understanding what they're using to drive change in businesses. I think knowledge starts everywhere. And Katie, as you're sharing a personal story, I know I had no idea about the importance of just which bank I chose. So it can be like initially, until I worked in banking, and I was much too old to be actually worrying about this initially, but it's something that's so small, and it's one of those you don't know, you know, until you know. I think gym memberships and private healthcare are a really interesting one at the moment, and taking a percentage off. We know that inflation is directly impacting the costs of those services. So when people's health are starting to be deteriorated, burnout is happening anyway from money stresses. You've just got this awful combination where people are just generally unwell. And if people are unwell, they're not working, your business is losing out.
Right. Yeah, And it goes across the board, doesn't it? And I think today we've seen what that ripple effect can be in a business, especially when it's a small business. I wanted to tackle a couple of the questions that have kind of come through. So hopefully, Bernie, don't give us the boot, and I'll try to get through them. Some of them are actually covering and branching into employment law. So I'm happy to weigh in on that because I probably didn't introduce myself properly, but I am an employment lawyer through and through and an employment lawyer at Employment Hero. So this is what I live, eat, and breathe, and I'm New Zealand based as well. So even more live, eating, and breathing.
Yeah.
So what I'll do is I'll kick off with the first question. I'm pretty sure that this is for you guys because I see the it's quite lengthy and I can see that it has to do with a lot of the cost of living and things. So this person says that as many HR practitioners are currently about to enter into remuneration review processes, what's your advice for managing employee expectations about pay increases? Is there anything, I might turn to you, Mads, first, because obviously, you've been dealing with this day in and day out. You've done it in the past as well. So is there, particularly considering the context of where cost of living has increased, like you mentioned, with certain things, how can a company deliver these outcomes to employees in a way that is really people focused and acknowledges the financial stress that they're under, but doesn't necessarily, I guess, fork out the pay rises when they're doing REM reviews?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I'm sure everyone is battling with it, no matter the size of your business. We can't keep up with that inflation. So my first approach is always around transparency is key. Be really clear about what the purpose of REM reviews are, what's being assessed, what are the outcomes for this review. I think when you acknowledge things first, it's going to be a lot easier to come to the table with your why before having to backtrack and respond to people's concerns after the math. You much want to go into those, one-on-ones or performance review conversations, having a really shared awareness of the purpose of REM reviews. And you can acknowledge it. You can acknowledge the fact that there's a cost of living and financial stress. As Katie touched on before, it's touching every single person at kind of every single income level. So it's not going to be just your most junior employees. Next, kind of broaden the conversation about salary. So talk into the entire package. So if you're having a conversation at REM review time, chances are you're also going to be touching on things like performance that often plays a part in how people are earning or their income changes for the year. So talk it through it holistically. If you're looking at growth and opportunities for that employee, that's when you start plugging those retention strategies in then and there. If they're speaking to you regarding concerns, just have a bit of a chat to them and understand what those concerns are. They may say, I've just hit some debt. Maybe it's been tax time and you've got tax owing. Maybe you can connect them with some webinars and podcasts. I think going in with the right purpose at the very start of REM reviews, being transparent that it's not about fixing the economy. It's about recognizing kind of performance over the year, the growth of the business, or whichever is kind of why you run your REM review.
And
Yeah, I loved also, how you mentioned, we might not have the budget to give you a pay rise. You're super important. Let's talk about the development opportunities, in terms of learning that we might be able to give you, in the next kind of 12 months. I think that sits really well with lots of people. What do you think?
Yeah.
And like to that, Katie, I was actually going to ask you. So I guess having that conversation is that professional development piece potentially as
Yeah.
well, and personal development piece
Absolutely.
where
Yeah,
people are using that
absolutely.
as a bit of
Yeah.
leverage. Yeah.
Yeah, and if things are a little bit tough and there is flexibility within the organization, maybe it is offering one more day at home working, which is going to save on commuting, potentially, a little bit of childcare, etc. It just goes such a long way in terms of I am heard, I am valued, and it is just not simply what they are paid.
Yeah, and one of the questions that we actually kind of came through. Um, a little bit cynical, I know, but I think it's fair because it is the conversation that we're having right now, and it is one of those topics where it's, how do we actually manage this? And I think I could probably tackle it because it is leaning a little bit more into employment law, but I'm happy for you guys to weigh in as well. Somebody said, all sounds good, but when the company offers small incentives or niceties, it often gets taken for granted over time, and then more and more is expected. As an employment lawyer, I have seen the worst case scenarios that come out of obviously, giving an inch and them taking a mile. But it is about very clearly setting up your boundaries. The fact that if employees are not aware of the fact that, look, this is what the company provides, we provide this across the board, or this is what we do, and to just stop the conversation there, then that's usually what will draw that line. If you try to keep, if you don't have clear expectations, if you don't set clear boundaries around these incentives and these particular things, and it is that transparency piece that Mads was talking about when she was talking about pay increases and salary reviews. It is transparency here as well. So you need to be very clear, set your parameters. If you are doing financial wellness related training and you are promising to do that year on year, then you need to make sure that you are offering that year on year and you're not going back on that. So make sure that it's something that you're setting up that's sustainable, that you're setting boundaries with your employees and with the workforce, and also making sure that you just the lawyer in me, do not put these things into employment contracts and things like that. These would all sit outside of that. Make sure these are things that you are, able to change when you want to, and they're not promises where you're under delivering on the promise as well. So yes, employees will try to push and they will ask for more, but you need to be very clear on what your boundaries are, what you can provide as a business from the get-go. So, but I'd be happy if you guys, I know that this is a very lawyer jaded response, but if you did want to weigh in, Mads,
Yeah.
let me know.
I'm happy to add some things, and the question said kind of small incentives, and I think it's really not about the size of the gesture, it's really how it's communicated. So definitely what you were talking about, Sanam, around transparency. We don't want to frame this as, a nicety, we're going to buy lunch for you today. Be really kind of purpose driven. This is a continuous commitment to your employees' financial resilience. If you're communicating actively the purpose, and don't this wouldn't just be a one-off thing, rather than just having a perks page going, here are all of the things, have a section dedicated to this. If this is a really important thing and something that you're driving really heavily, going, these are our financial well-being or financial resilience perks, these are dedicated to helping you do better with money and what you have.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
I love that.
Katie,
Yeah.
I'm guessing that you're feeling similar sentiment or maybe a bit different.
Well, I would actually be more pragmatic as well and say you need to connect your financial well-being of your staff to business metrics. Like, this is going to drive better business results if you do it well. Make sure you measure that. Retention, productivity, and engagement scores. This is a strategic business investment. We're not trying to be, super nice people. We are understanding that there are issues, and we want our employees to bring their whole selves to work. And how do we ensure that that happens to make sure the business exists and continues to exist and is optimal into the future? So the challenge would always be, we're not just doing things for the sake of doing things. We are measuring whether they work. And if they don't, we pivot. And it's not a lock and leave. It's about making sure your why in terms of what you're doing.
And like you said, it is tying that back into the strategy of the business,
Yeah,
because at the end of the
right.
day, they won't be considered as small niceties and things like that when you actually look at it from a strategic perspective, because then you'd be able to say, okay, well, we do this initiative for this particular reason. We don't do this because of this particular reason. And this is what fits in with the strategy. So completely makes sense. I'll do one more question. And it's an interesting one. It's a little bit of employment law, a little bit of, financial advisory. It's around when you are putting out a job advertisement and you are, you know, you don't want to lay out every single thing that you offer in terms of perks and benefits and all these extras, because it might not be consistent. You might offer it to, you know, one role and then maybe not another role. And to that, I would say these are probably things that you keep outside of that job offer and that job ad. And it could be something that is maybe an initiative across the board that you've brought in, or you might individually mention it as part of the interview process or something like that. But you might not want to go out to market with that. But of course, I'll defer to you guys. Mads, do you want to kick off? I see you nodding. I feel like you know
Yeah,
what you can say for this
I
one.
agree. I agree. I would keep. I agree. I would keep this out of your job adverts or contracts or anything written unless you can guarantee it's something that you're doing on a cyclical basis. Even if you don't know what you're doing year on year, you could say that you have a month dedicated to kind of financial resilience. So it's fine to not be specific in this, but unless you're doing it consistently, I wouldn't mention it in there. When we talk about EVP or like an in value proposition, it doesn't just have to be everything internal is external. So you can have these conversations internally without kind of any cause for concern. But if you're looking to attract people due to kind of this strategy, then, you know, dedicate a month or a day and get some cyclical and expectations from the business to make sure that you're meeting that, because you don't want to say you're doing this and then there's a year that things are chaotic and busy and it doesn't
That's right.
happen.
I mean, we see it with pay reviews, right? When somebody randomly writes somewhere in the employment contract that they're going to review pay every 12 months and then they forget because they're so busy or something's
People forget.
and they can't do it. Yeah. So, but Katie, well, what do you reckon? Do you
Yeah,
think?
I 100% agree with both of you. And I think there's a fluidity in this as well in terms of what's most relevant to your workforce. It's not a lock and leave, it's not a one size fits all. So I really like that it's there is flexibility in terms of execution into the future. I wholeheartedly agree.
Yeah. Oh no, perfect. And this has been fabulous to the both of you. I mean, it's been such an interesting conversation. I messaged Bernie just before and I said, you know, 5 more minutes and then we'll wrap up. And she said, yes, perfect. Loving the conversation. So hopefully everyone out there is sharing the same sentiment and they're enjoying. I'm really glad that we were able to do this and to bring this to the forefront. So thank you so much to everybody for being here today and for joining us. And more so, a massive thank you to the panelists. I mean, Mads, Katie, you guys were amazing. So much knowledge and actual practical information people can walk away with today. So thank you so much for that. And also to that, we love to know how we're doing when it comes to these webinars and these presentations. I haven't been fired yet, which means that they've been running pretty okay. So if you guys have some time at the end of this, you will have a survey that will pop up just to get your feedback, to see what we could change. Please don't you know, be too heavy-handed with critique. You know, our hearts can only take so much, but no, but please no. But we appreciate your honesty. So if you have any feedback, then let us know. And before we close off, we just wanted to say thank you so much to everybody for taking the time out, and make sure that you are kind of looking at your emails. We'll be sending through all this information. And just to that as well, one of the questions that popped up was actually around pay secrecy and salary disclosure laws changing in New Zealand. I touched on it a bit earlier in the presentation piece, so please feel free to go back, have a look at the recording, and I'm pretty sure that will answer some of your questions. And Employment Heroes put out some information around that recently. So thank you so much, panelists. I appreciate you being here. If there's anything anyone has questions about or anything like that, you know, we absolutely will love for you to touch base with Katie from Enable Me. And if you are needing a financial advisor, somebody that knows this stuff day in, day out, that does this, lives, eats, and breathes it, then Katie is your person. So please, we will have all the information sent out as part of the pack. So thank you so much, Katie. Thank you so much, Mads, for being here. And for doing this with a smile on your face. Nobody ever talks about finances smiling, you know?
Well, yeah, it's a season, right? Love it. Take care. Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye, everyone.
Bye.